Let me start by saying this is all true. You can draw hair beautifully, even as a beginner, in just 5 easy steps. But there is a catch. You have to watch this video till the end to discover all of the tips that I will share with you today. Hello, welcome to my art studio. For this tutorial, I will use graphite pencils of different hardness and softness, erasers, fine tip pencils and erasers, a piece of drawing paper, smudging tools. I'll also tell you what you can substitute these materials for if you don't have everything on hand. Now, step 1 is probably the simplest step, so it won't take too long, and you probably would already know quite a bit about it if you have been drawing even just a little bit. And the main thing for the step 1 is to get your structure and outlines correctly, so that then you don't need to worry about the shape and can focus on the form. I'm not going to get too far into drawing a face and structuring the head shape. I do have those videos on my Patreon, so remember this for after you finish watching this video. I have more tutorials on Patreon that show you how to draw other bits and pieces like eyes, face, lips, and so on. So make sure to check that out. And we have a lot of fun there. We do giveaways every month and all sorts of other things. And you can start supporting this channel starting from $2 a month. So make sure to go and check it out and see for yourself what tier you might like to choose. I think Patreon has also opened a free subscription as well. It will limit what you can access, but you can subscribe for free now as well. So make sure to definitely go and check it out. I will leave a link to Patreon under this video. So as you can see, in this stage when drawing here, you don't need to get too much into the detail. You want to make sure that you have a full shape down. You can focus on some details like large strands of hair. Don't worry about little flyaways and things like that. You really don't want to get into this now. It will just complicate the process, and I will tell you why a little bit later on. If you still don't know how to measure and draw things out properly, you can always resolve this with tracing, although I'm not a big fan of tracing because I think it robs you of your amazing skill that you can achieve by learning how to structure things. Anyway, this is what the first stage looks like. As I said, it is a very simple step, which pretty much drawing anything would have that step. But the second step is where many people start to get it wrong. What is the difference between the way a beginner approaches drawing here and a professional artist? And the difference is that beginners start to get into details way too quick. This is where this second step, even though it might seem a little bit boring at this stage, will be your perfect base for the hair. For that, we would need a reasonably soft pencil. I've got 6B, so you can use something 6B, 5B, perhaps even 8B would do well. So the aim at this stage is to cover everything in one medium shade. If you're working on darker hair, this shade can be deeper. If you're working on lighter colored shade, this medium shade will be a little bit lighter. So how can you decide which median shade is the perfect one for the hair you're drawing? If you look at the image or a person, if you're drawing from real life, you will notice that there is almost like a shade that's in the middle. There would be highlights, there would be lowlights, shadows, but something in the middle. This is the kind of a shade that you go for. You want to shade in the direction of the hair growth. You don't have to, but it will really save you a lot of battling with your blending materials later on. And don't feel too precious at this stage. Most of this won't even be showing as a detail at the end of the drawing, so free yourself up, because remember, being stiff and very, very tense is the best way to fail your drawing. So relax, Don't worry about what the final product would look like, and you will get much better results, surprisingly. Now, the best way to hold your pencil for this stage is to hold it a little bit sideways. So you see, I'm not really holding it like this, I'm holding it more like that. So that way it's just a little bit easier for your wrist to control the lines and create curved lines, which you normally have because people's heads tend to be more on the rounded side. You can use that movement of your wrist to help you guide your pencil very quickly in the right direction. If you, for example, working on the opposite way, you can even turn your drawing around like this and carry on doing a very similar thing by the use of your wrist movement. Much easier than trying to do this. Just a little tip there to help you guys out. Now, back to shading. Now, part 1 of step 2 is pretty much finished. To finish step 2, we need to use a smudge stick, or if you don't have a smudge stick, you can use a brush. Might take a little bit longer if it's a soft brush, or even if you can't get access to smudge sticks, you can always use tissue paper, and I'm sure you'll have tissue paper or even toilet paper on hand, so you can use that for smudging. I'll just show you in a second how you can use both. So smudge stick is quite precise, so it'll be quite good to get into all the edges like so, but tissue paper is a little bit larger, so what you want to do is you want to either roll it up nicely like that and put your finger, you can achieve the same result. And for smaller details, I would suggest to further fold it over and go in like this. Now it probably won't hold its shape for too long, so you'll have to keep reshaping it and so on, but I mean, it beats not having anything for smudging if you don't have a smudge stick on hand. These are very inexpensive, so if you get a chance, go to your local art shop or even stationery shop and you'll be able to grab a whole pack for just a couple of dollars. Another very useful tip: whenever you're smudging this or any other drawing, if you want to preserve some of the lines that you have created, make sure to smudge along with the lines that you have created. If you want to completely smudge something out, go opposite the lines that you have created, like for example here. Like this, and then you completely get rid of any pencil markings that you may have created using a pencil. So you see the difference between here and here. Again, you can use this when drawing here or creating any other drawing. So as you can see, our step 2 is now finished. And this is what I mean. A lot of people go straight for the details, start to work on the strands, try to show the highlights and the shadows, but this is where you're really digging yourself a really deep hole and creating a lot of ways to really catch yourself out. Now, with this step, where you pretty much just marked what it is, so you can kind of see where the hair is, we are ready to start working on step number 3. Now, step number 3 would require a darker pencil. So if you've been using 5B, for example, you might want to go for 6 or 7B. If you've been using 4B, if you had lighter hair, or 3B, you might want to go for 6B. Because I was using 6B, I'm going to go to 8B because the hair on this particular person is quite dark. So a darker, softer pencil that will be great for creating the next step. Next step is looking at deeper values. So remember, this was the middle tone. Now we're going into the darker shadows. I'm so sorry, I can hear that barking too. I think it's my neighbor's dogs that are barking. I'm sure it won't last too long. They're usually really well behaved little guys. So, a softer pencil for darker shadows. At this stage, you might also like to grab a paper to protect your hand and protect your drawing. In the direction of the hair growth, you want to shade the areas that you can see are darker on the photograph that you're using or on the person that's sitting in front of you. You can still rely on the technique of wrist control that I showed you in step 2. Within this step, you can start to be much more selective than you were in step number 2, because here we are looking only at the darker areas, which means some of the hair strands will be a little bit more pronounced. So make sure to go for this, but still avoid all the little hairs and little flyaways. This is not the step to do that in. Now, if you have trouble creating prolonged lines, especially with specific curves that may be going one way and then the other way, you don't need to do them all in one go. You can create an interlinked chain of your pencil marks. And how do you do that? What you want to do is you want to first create short line in the direction that you need, and then within those lines you can carry on with more short lines and then carry on again until you reach the length that you need. This is quite a short little bit here, but if you're drawing long hair or if you're working on a larger portrait, for example, you might like to use this technique in many areas. Some of the shadows on the hair that I'm drawing are really dark, so I want to make sure that I go all out with the soft pencil. You can mark some of the darker strands as well, so pay attention if those hair strands are thicker or thinner. While you're drawing, especially working on dark hair, for example, you will encounter some areas where there is no light reflection, no texture definition, and it's super dark. And in these cases, what you can do is you can actually grab your pencil and go against the grain of the hair growth that you may have already created. So areas like this here, this is what you can do. Make sure that you are using your softer pencil. You can still correct the shape of the hair at this stage. Remember, it will not look like the finished drawing, and it's not supposed to, because this is only stage 3, but with each step it is getting closer and closer to the finished look. Now for this stage, you can hold your pencil in different positions. Like, for example, if you're still doing quite a bit of covering quite a bit of area, you can hold your pencil a little bit sideways like this, or like this. But if you really want to get into the dark spots, I suggest holding it a little bit further away from the tip and holding it further back like this. Okay, so now we've finished with applying the darker shades, and for the second part of step 3, just like we did with the second part of step 2, we're going to use a smudging material again. You can use your napkin or tissue paper or whatever it is that you have, or a smudge stick if you have those on hand. Just like before, you want to smudge in the direction of the hair growth, except for the areas where you want to completely blur out all the lines, like for example in really dark shadows, or sometimes in some reflections, and depending on the hair type and hair style, you might see different areas that require that kind of treatment. Now, if you would like to know more about smudge sticks and how to use them or how they're made, and pencils and things like that. I already have those videos here on YouTube, and I will leave the links under the video so you can check those out if you'd like. Now by the time you're done with step 3, so you've applied the shadows and you have blurred them out a little bit, smudged them, this is what it'll probably look like. Again, depending on how dark the hair is, this color should be a little bit lighter if you're working on the blonde or the lighter haired person. We are ready to move on to step 4. Now step 4 is applying highlights. For that we would need some erasers. So here I have a putty eraser, which is very handy if you want to shape it and go for either like lines or just remove some of the graphite without completely erasing it. I also have, you know, your regular eraser that, I mean, anyone probably have, you know, something that you'd normally have at school or whatever, vinyl eraser. And I also have this very detailed eraser. If you don't have one of those, and I would imagine some of you who are beginners might not, because these are not the cheapest, they are really worth getting. But if you don't have this, you see here, what you can actually do is grab a knife and actually cut a thin little slice. Now with this slice you will be able to get into tiny little areas and create highlights that can resemble separate strands of hair. Now this is something that you can do if you don't have one of those. And putty eraser is also something worth getting. But again, if you don't have it, you would just have to resort to using cuttings from your other eraser. Please don't use blue tack with graphite pencils. You can swap for a blue tack if you are using charcoal, but not this. This is way too fine for blue tack. So first I'm going to use this in some areas where I can see on the image there. I have my computer open, so I'm looking at it right now. I can see that there are some highlights on this side here. So I'm just going to pick a little bit of this up. Now this eraser is perfect for areas that you want a little bit lighter rather than removing graphite to white paper. With this eraser, because you can shape it, you can really get into depicting specific strands and bringing out certain areas that the light really hits. What's so important about creating these highlights is that you need to understand that not all highlights are equal. Some highlights are really soft but large, so large areas affected. Some highlights are very, very precise, and some highlights are just like a single hair. Make sure that you pay attention. Like for example, for larger strands you can go quite softly and capture quite a large area. So there are a few larger strands down here, so this is what I'm going to do. Then there are some highlights that are stronger but smaller, so still quite wide but a little bit smaller. So for example here, just on the area where the hair bends and catches the most light, like that. At this stage, if you want to, you can again go over with a smudge stick lightly. You don't have to if you don't want to, but you can if you want to soften maybe some of the highlights. Or maybe you have created some areas that are just a little too light for your liking, so you can always go back and give them a little bit more of a smudging to create a deeper shade. Now you see, once we've applied some of the highlights, the darker areas look even darker because our eye always compares what's lighter and what's darker. So something dark won't look as intense next to a dark object as next to a light object. So just another little tip there for you guys. So here we have it. This is step number 4, and this is what it looks like by the time we're finished with it. Now I'm going to move on to step number 5. But before I do, I want to make sure that I just do a little bit more work on the face. I will do this off camera to not make it too long and tedious for you guys. Again, if you want to learn how to draw faces, eyes, and so on in a very realistic way, how to structure a face, please head over to my Patreon page where all of these videos are already available. So now I am ready to move to step 5. At the end of step 5, you will have your finished drawing. So this is where we go for the final details. Now you see how long have we gone and how many stages we had to complete before we move on to the final details. And again, I'm going back to where I mentioned the difference between the beginner approach and the professional approach. The beginners would usually go for things we're going to be doing now after finishing the structure. But you see now how many layers we had to complete before going for this final step. Okay, so for this step you would want a fine pencil, so something like a mechanical pencil with thin, tiny little pencil leads. If you don't have one of those, you can always go for a regular pencil, but what you would have to do is you'd have to constantly sharpen it so that you have a really fine tip. So you'd pretty much do a few lines and then just shave a little bit off to create a very nice point for yourself, which is a little bit more time consuming but definitely doable. So again, I'm gonna go for my little paper friend here, and this hairstyle that I'm working on has a little bit of the flyaways on the top, so this is what I'm gonna do with this pencil. So on this line here on the edge of the hair, I'm going to draw a few final little flyaway details. Now this is something that at the end really creates that very realistic look, very detailed look that many people who are learning to draw want to achieve. But again, pay attention to the steps when you are drawing and make sure that this is the last step. Please pay attention to the photograph that you are working with the person's hair, because sometimes you can get a lot of flyaways and sometimes you can get very silky hair where you pretty much have no flyaways. So make sure you pay attention, and if there are no separate strands that you see on the pretty much what you would call an outline of the head, then make sure you don't include those. If the flyaways on your image are just like on my image, a little bit sort of a kinky and a little bit wavy, make sure that you hold your pencil a bit further back rather than right by the tip, because when you hold your pencil like this, you have more control of the pencil and you're more likely to do a straight, proper line. When you're holding it back like this, you can apply a little pressure a little bit differently and create a very interesting hairline. When you hold your pencil like this, your hand is also a little bit more relaxed. And remember, being relaxed while drawing is a really important key to creating a successful artwork. Okay, so now that we have the flyaways on the outside of the head, let's have a look on some of the finer details and finer hair strands within the hair itself. A word of warning though, make sure you're not creating details that are not observable. So if you don't see details, like for example for me here, I don't see any strands, it's just all dark, same kind of hair. If I start creating more lines and more patterns, the hair would look very flat. So if you want to create the realistic look of the hair, make sure that you are not going and using your imagination to create it. This is why it's so important to have something to look at while you're drawing. So here we go. If some of the finer hair are showing between some of the larger strands that we have depicted, make sure to add those in. This is also a perfect time to shade some of the areas that are supposed to be darker than you have them. So make sure you do all of those things at this step. Also make sure to work on any areas where you see the really fine hair texture. So where you can see hair strands, you can just go over these areas with multiple lines, because this really fine pencil will be able to give you these really perfect little lines. At this stage, you also want to pay attention to where the hair finishes. So if, for example, with a really blunt cut that I can see is on this girl, you can actually create really nice edges where some of the separate hairs are showing. For softer hair edges, make sure that you go out like this, then your little edge of the hair strand tapers into pretty much nothing. But for more of a blunt cut, make sure that you start on the edge and then move upwards. Another aspect you might want to look at in this stage as well are some hairs that are, especially in these unruly hairstyles, you know how we did some flyaways, there might be some single strands that are just sort of popping up over the face or anywhere else. So you can add those in as well. And I have some of those right near her ear, so just little hairs like this, and then few longer hairs. So obviously some of them are behind her ear, but the other part is kind of going over. So and at this stage we can soften some of them just like this. Remember, if you want to create softness, you can just go really softly with the pencil, or if you want them a little bit stronger and harsher, you can always just press on the pencil a little bit stronger. You can also get different softness and hardness leads for these mechanical pencils too. So any of these longer strands that are sticking out, make sure you put them in at this stage. Now next in this step 5, so second part of step 5, is to use your erasers to create final little highlights. I don't have that many in my artwork because the hair is quite dark, but if there is a really strong light, or if perhaps the model that you're drawing is blonde, then you might like to use quite a bit of these. So again, I'm just going to place this under my hand, and just in some areas where I can see highlights a little bit brighter than what I have here. Now these would be quite small areas now, again especially because the hair is quite dark. But it will give that extra little bit of shine to the hair that you are drawing. Sometimes what can also happen as well, we draw we smudge and we move our hands or a piece of paper over the drawing, and some of the brighter highlights can really become much more duller and a little bit smudged. So this is a good opportunity to really bring those back to the way that you sketch them during the drawing. Any kind of details that maybe you've picked up with your fine pencil now can be highlighted as well, like the little strand here that I'm drawing. Knowing all that you know now, let me know in the comments. Do you feel more confident approaching drawing a hair or a portrait? Let me know. Also, let me know what else you would like me to teach you how to draw. I make sure I read most of the comments, at least the ones that YouTube lets me read. You know, YouTube can be a little bit tricky, and that's why it is important that you give this video a like and subscribe to my channel if you want to see more new videos that will be coming up soon. I look forward to reading your comments and filming more videos for you. I also would like to say a big thank you to my wonderful patrons that are already supporting this channel and voting for my Patreon only tutorials to choose what else they want to see next. So I hope you guys have a lovely day, and thank you so much for drawing with me. See you soon.